The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, we are pleased to bring forth our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he presents words and phrases you need to know. But before we get started, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's receive Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey.
Salam, assalamu alaikum, vadimekum. We're going to go over a few words and phrases. So everyone as usual, get out your pens and papers and take notes. This is basically old stuff, old lessons that most of you who have been studying over the years, and many of you who are quote unquote cognate of the difference between the dead or corporate operations of the popes of Rome and the bishopric of Rome, distinguished from the living, breathing, sentient man and woman, and the conflicts that have arisen due to the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors by the Pope, Roman Catholic Church, and the Pope and the popes and the bishopric of Rome, which is at the basis of almost all your modern wars on the planet. And relative to the political operations, particularly here at North America and exported around the world after colonization of the North Gate of the Maghreb of North, Central, South America, etc. And due to the omission of certain pertinent information to the people in general, and as many of you already know, due to the actual fact, that most of the people have been subjected to mind control, psychic attacks, and animal husbandry disguised as education, many of us have been handicapped in many areas relative to government, self-government, right of self-government, rights, liberties, hereditaments, etc., and the like. And so while this is all familiar information to many of you who have been studying for years, because of the fact that many people around Midgard are beginning to wake up to much of the corruption that has been instituted in most circles of government, etc., I find it useful to share some of these words and phrases, all of which we can't go through because of a time constraint. However, we'll pick out certain words and phrases and present them to you again, as we've done over the last couple of decades, etc. In that it can bring up to snuff many of the people who have been left behind relative to the actual operations of government, particularly relative to law and sovereignty, which has been pretty much denied to the people in general, etc. to the point that many people have been deceived into thinking that it has nothing to do with them due to a lack of knowing or lack of interest on their part, which has much to do with training more than actual reality. So we're going to go through some of the words and phrases and make note of them to change or to accentuate the state of mind or the states of mind of our people in relationship to the important elemental political Edamon construct issues involving the Edamon applications and the usage and usages of certain words and phrases as deemed for social engineering. And so we'll go into some of this and trust that we will spark some conversations with you among yourselves. Because some things we, again, like I say, some things we can't go all the way into detail due to constriction of time. But by sharing some of this with you, it should stir you and stimulate your interest in these matters that absolutely involve every phase of your life in society. Now, as was spoken of earlier and in other treatises and sessions, we shall emphasize the importance of one having at least a basic knowledge of the linguistic root nature of and about etymology. Now, one must not ever forget that while social and civilization institutions are a natural evolutionary part of human social societies, one must also keep in mind that corrupt governments tend to corrupt institutions for the sake of protecting the foul and corrupt politicians and their contracted minions from the general populace and or the targeted natural beings deemed for pillage, peonage, misrepresentations, trafficking, miseducation, and extortion, etc. In the interest of diligence for the learned and for reminding, and or informing the less knowing and less diligent among us, we will quickly recall the meaning of etymology and of the etymon and about semantic deceit, quote unquote, as used for and by de facto governing bodies and for foreign occupational government administrators. Now, let us note some words and phrases often deceptively used in society for establishing or maintaining de facto operations and for veiling corrupt governance. The list of words and phrases presented here in this treatise does not always mean that the meanings, usages, and placements of them are always negative. Does not mean they're always negative. Many words and phrases are lent to the positive, yet the deliberate omissions made of some of them in specific instances may have injurious consequences. And such instances are not always accidental or by oversight. And the deceitful misplacements of words and phrases and some noted semantic deceits or deceit applications of the same as applied in specific circumstances are to be taken into consideration. However, one must look into the social, economic, and the political status positions of the natural beings in question, particularly the clarification of quote unquote person being the living, divine, breathing being as distinguished from the corporate fiction entity that is of primal concern. Those matters are of primal concern. So logically, issues about jurisdiction, about hereditaments, about rights, liberties, property, and the like are always pertinent. The following are some of the important words and phrases to know about and to consider at all times, and particularly when dealing with anyone who claims to have or to possess governmentally delegated authority. Now, there are no exclusions, none. Remember this: the law of nature is superior to any other laws, and it is binding in all countries at all times. Keep that in mind. And anything to the contrary, in law, in government, notwithstanding. So I'm going to give you a list of some words. Many of you, again, those of you who are studied, of course, this is redundant to many of you, but because so many more people are waking up around the country, around our land, around the continent, and around the world, because for the most part, we've all been bitten by the same rabid dog of politics. And that's a fact. So, a list of words and phrases for study. 1, person. Write this down. Some of these things we will note on tonight, but much of this you will do research on your own, and it's best to study with others who are studying also, so that you can sharpen swords with each other and also become more competent in your comprehension and etymon overstanding of what words are, also what they actually mean in their truth, in their veracity, in their history, in their origin, and in their morphology, etc. So 1, person. 2, land. 3, hereditament. Hereditament. And of course, that deals with corporal and incorporeal. Hereditament, corporal, and incorporeal. 4, free white persons. Free white persons. 5, arbitrary. Arbitrary. 6, prize courts. Prize courts. 7, ordinances. Ordinances. 8, treaties of peace. Treaties of peace. 9, intercourse of nations. Intercourse of nations. 10, primary. Primary. 11, secondary. Secondary. 12, alliance. Alliance. 13, commerce. Commerce. 14, colored. Colored. 15, colored person. Colored person. 16, color of law. Color of law. 17, color of authority. Color of authority. 18, color of office. Color of office. 19, Law of nature. Law of nature. 20. Natural justice. Natural justice. 21. Jus gentium. Jus gentium. That's Jus, capital Gentium. Jus gentium. Next word, phrase, in propria persona. In propria persona. Next word, minority. Minority. Next word, wardship. Wardship. That's WARDSHIP. Next phrase, parens patriae. That's PARENS, capital PATRIAE. Parens patriae. Next word, surety. Surety. Next word, trespass. Trespass. Next word, perfidy. Perfidy. That's PERFIDY. Next word, performance. Performance. Next word, hell. Hell. Next word, exchequer. That's EXCHEQUER. Exchequer. Next word, conversion. Conversion. Next word, reversion. Reversion. Next phrase, reversion of estate. Reversion of estate. Next phrase, stare decisis. Stare decisis. STARE DECISIS. Stare decisis. Next word, symboliography. Symboliography. That's SYMBOLAEOGRAPHY. Symboliography. Next word, status. Status. Next word, estate. Estate. Next phrase, corpus delicti. Corpus delicti. That's CORPUSDELICTI. Corpus delicti. Next word, semantics. 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 TICS. Semantics. Next word. Allodial. 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 Next word. Allonge. Allonge. That's ALLONGE. Allonge. Next word. Noble. Noble. Next word. Mortgage. Mortgage. Next word. Divine. Divine. Next word. De facto. DE space FACTO. De facto. Next word. De jure. De jure. DE space JURE. De jure. Next word. Treaty. Treaty. Next word. Constitution. Constitution. Next word. Principle. Principle. Next word. Agent. Agent. Now we have other words, but these, if you get grounded in many of these, comprehend that one of the reasons we're sharing this is because in the near future, many of these things will come more to the surface for you to be talking about in the social and political platforms and paradigms that you're meeting now and will be meeting in the very near future. And so you need to be up on some of these things because people who should have told you much of this have taken the position that you should not know about these things. We already know that. And so, yet all these things have been affecting your lives every day, even if you haven't been told about it, and even if you haven't been interested. However, things that are coming about now and in the near future to face all of us actually, are important for you to be up on some of these things because they're going to affect your lives, and you'll be better served being aware of them when you hear them, or when you notice that when you do some research, some of these words and phrases are conveniently absent or conveniently misrepresented to you when you discover some of this stuff. However, it's operative in your everyday affairs. And for those of you who have not been familiar with some of these words and phrases, know that just because you haven't been familiar with them does not mean they have not been operative in your everyday lives, because they absolutely have. And then a lot of things that we've talked about over the years, I think a lot of times many of the questions that arise among the people are because they're not aware of some of these words and phrases, or when they hear them, they go past them because they're not familiar, and therefore they don't comprehend the messages or the information that's being presented to aid in the uplifting of fallen humanity, particularly in relationship to the fact that we've been under diabolical and demonic governmental operations for generations, and most of the people have not known it. And because most of the people have not been aware that the people who they've deemed as their government were in fact not their government, and had never intended to actually give or to execute what is known as government services to the people, but have in fact been systematically raping and pillaging the people, and also genociding the people, and also poisoning the people, making the people sick, and then blackmailing the people with pharmaceuticals, etc., and with military operations under the guise of nation and country. And in fact, all your wars have been executed by criminals who you thought was government, and assisted by people among your own who you thought were convenient helpers in the society. Though lesser degree, as far as operational administration, they were assisting the criminal operations of de facto government knowingly for generations, and they've been undetected because you didn't know how to vet them or to measure them. And this is another reason why we're sharing this information, because due to the fact that many people around the world are awakening now, it has created a little bit of unrest among de facto government operatives and people among yourselves who up to this point have been well insulated among you and that you've trusted, but you didn't know that they were actually agents for the popes of Rome to some degree. And this has nothing to do with the fact that they've called themselves your friends or civil leaders or religious leaders, etc. As a matter of fact, most of the people that have caused injury in your society successfully on behalf of Rome has been because you have trusted these people, and they have won your trust with misconceptions, semantic deceit, also removing certain information from many documentations, and particularly and deliberately not teaching etymology, not teaching the etymological principles, which should have been taught at a second and third grade level in any proper schooling system, and specifically civics, etc. And of course, by virtue of them adjusting artificially the chronology operations at Midgard, i.e., they've tampered with all the calendars, etc., to actually set the people off cycle, and altered or reconstructed history, deleted much of the foundation of law and jurisprudence, and totally corrupted the principles of jurisdiction, etc., and hidden the obligations and duties of government, quote unquote, officials, etc., and the conditions by which any such persons should hold office, etc., and the limitations or the limited delegated authority to anyone in any body politic that is known as government. And the very fact that they also don't teach divine law and natural law, which is superior to all other laws, and international law is based in natural law. They're associated as the same. And so when you hear the phrase international law, you understand that you're talking natural law. And no law, no legislation of any type supersedes or is at any time superior to natural law. And now many of you have heard that phrase, but you haven't been told by people who are in so-called government, or people who are so-called community leaders, as they sometimes are phrased as being, whether they call them civil rights leaders or marchers and prayers and guys and girls who help the so-called community. Their alleged authorities, etc., is often, more often than not, actually and absolutely colored, which means misrepresented, which means artificial, which means distorted, which means also personating positions of authority that don't exist with them and is not vested in them, and also fundamental frauds and misrepresentations in general. However, being aware of many of these words and phrases that we presented to you as a background of your vocabulary, it will get you more grounded in vetting people who claim authority in your lives at all, under any condition, and also bring you to a level of more competent self-governance by which you can protect yourself, your interests, your properties, your hereditaments, corporal and incorporeal, etc., all of which have been abridged, trespassed against, abused, and stolen by people you thought were actually operating in your interest. And the opposite has been the case.
Excuse me, Grand Chief.
Go ahead.
Did you include the word bank and bench?
Yes. Well, that I didn't get to that. Well,
Okay. All right.
That's also important. The words bank and bench. Write that down too, anyway, since you brought that up.
And birth and birth.
Huh?
Birth, I, birth, E.
Yeah. Birth, B-I-R, and birth, B-E-R. Both of them.
And this is another one I got for you, Fred.
Hmm?
Parents, P-A-R-E-N-T-S, and pair, P-A-I-R, rents, R-E-N-T-S, 2 words.
Parents. Interesting.
Pair rents, because it has to do with diversity.
Yes. But anyway, now for one point of interest for you all, particularly because the nature of sharing with you words and phrases, myself and Dr. Nail was talking earlier about this subject matter. And while this is not new to many of you, it is new to some of you. And so we'll give you an idea or the nature of the importance of why we're sharing this with you. As an example, symboliography, which many of you have not been particularly aware of. So symboliography is the symbolic writing, and this deals with many of the instruments that have been presented to you in the name of social structure and government. As an example, the semantic deceit, which is constructed when they issue marriage certificates, the semantic deceit in symboliography, which is executed when they issue birth certificates, driver's licenses, CDLs, and any other instruments which are known as bottomry instruments coming from operatives of the corporate state who claim to be government on behalf of serving the people. And all of these instrumentalities are constructed with symboliography, and this has much to do as to why certain communities and people have been artfully targeted for poverty and for gentrification, and then at the same time, the people not suspecting that they were actually being engineered by people who were issuing these instruments. And these instruments are all constructed in symboliography. Being aware of that, you will look at things totally different. And of course, it will change your perspectives. But most importantly, it will change your actions if you're responsible to yourselves and to your families. And this has much to do with the reasoning as to why we, over the years, have been sharing a lot of this fundamental civic information with people, because we know that the people in general, all of us, have been suffering from semantic deceits unbeknownst to ourselves, because we trusted these people who were so-called, quote unquote, educating us and so-called, quote unquote, governing over our affairs, all of whom have extremely violated us and actually trespassed us against us on many levels. So symboliography is symbolic writing. It is the art, excuse me, because I want you all to remember to review this and write some of this stuff down. And those of you who have Bouvier's law dictionaries and Black's law dictionaries, Bell's law dictionaries, all your law dictionaries, and your unabridged dictionaries, do cross-reference and study. Symboliography is the symbolic writing, and it is the art and the cunning rightly to form and to make written instruments. I repeat, symboliography, which is symbolic writing, is the art or the cunning rightly to form and to make written instruments. This also would include what you know as writs, etc. It is either judicial or extrajudicial. So write those words down too. Judicial and extrajudicial. Get used to it because it occurs in your lives every day. The latter being wholly occupied with such instruments as concern matters not yet judicially in controversy, such as instruments of agreements or of contracts and of testaments or of last wills. Repeat. Symboliography instruments concern matters not yet judicially or presented yet in controversy judicially, such as instruments of agreements or contracts, and instruments of testaments and instruments of last wills. And so you're dealing with the issue of trust, etc., things that go on every day that is not brought to your attention because you've been abridged on many of these, in many of these areas on a constant basis, and is actually the source of most of the injury and poverty suffered by the people at large. And indeed, many of the people are not aware that the poverty problems that exist at Midgard on the planet, etc., have been artificially constructed and are not harmonic in nature. Might sound odd to many of you, however, that's the absolute truth. And because many of these things are being addressed by the awakening people at Midgard, a lot of these things that have not been discussed in the past will become more commonly discussed openly. And so it is important that we share some of these things with you, that some of you who are interested will be in a more competent position to start dealing with your affairs, because it's going to be in your best interest to start dealing with your own affairs. Because as you discover, and you will discover, and not so much that you're discovering, they're going to show you. You're going to see corruption on a scale that your mind, many of you, will have difficulty wrapping your mind around the corruption that is going to be exposed to you in the near coming future. And it is in your own interest to, for those of you who haven't been on this path of studying, to start getting yourself together Even though many of us are late in the game, if you're still breathing and you're still not totally destroyed, although most of you have been economically injured severely and hindered severely and socially injured severely and socially handicapped severely and socially constricted severely, there's still movement and you're still breathing. Better late than never is the phrase that I present to you in this matter. So take heed and keep in mind, just as Dr. Naila shared a few more words and phrases with me, the issue is not limited to what we presented to you, but one thing or two things will lead you to other information. And in doing so, you will be made more competent in your everyday affairs. It is absolutely necessary that you do become more acute in your knowledge about civics, governmental structure. And as we shared with you all the past week or two about law and government and sovereignty, because this has been absolutely misrepresented to the people. And also the divine principle of sovereignty has been stolen from the people. Many people are not aware that it is not granted to you by government, etc. It is a divine, original nature of your relationship with your divine creator, etc. And that's a fact. And it has been stolen by people who have been claiming to be government, and also by others who have been saying falsely that you gave it to them, and they have had a right by consent on your behalf to abuse you, to abuse your estate, to gain and accumulate extreme wealth at your expense, and to also genocide you out when you protest or say anything that conflicts with their agenda of genocide and world governance, etc., or world conquest in the name of government, when in fact they have not been legitimate government around the planet for actually generations. And this is part of the corruption that has been entrenched at Midgard that you're going to find out. And logically, it is in your interest not to be handicapped in recognizing some of these things that will be coming up as far as information, the information basis of issues that will be presented to you in your everyday affairs, particularly as the persons that you trusted as government will be more and more openly abusing you, more and more openly stealing from you, and more openly using color of authority, color of office, and color of law to regulate you and to regulate your families to your injury and to their economic, social, and political benefit, which they have been doing, but you had not been aware of it. And that's been problematic. And logically, as the world or the people of the planet are waking up more and more, those persons who you thought was government are clamping down and starting to do a lot of spurious things to cause more injury to the people, to maintain their corrupted powers that have been artificially stolen by misrepresentation and personation and by corruption and by force of arms. And so even though they're criminal thieves, human traffickers, etc., they're using the sovereign powers that you have given up or not maintained and trusted them with and using it against you. That's what they've been doing. And rather than acknowledging the divine right of humanity and acknowledging natural law to which all nations are obligated, they have been absolutely working absolutely to the contrary and against the interest of the people of the planet, Midgard, etc. And so this has much to do reasoning why we're sharing this information, though redundant, with you all tonight. And this has more to do with people who are waking up and have not had what you would call general resource information in these matters of civics and birthright restoration, and in matters of reversion of estate, and also in matters of comprehending, uh, you might say, mission motive of, as an example, the Moorish Divine and National Movement of the world, as established by our illustrious prophet Noble Drew Ali, and clarity would be shed on the mission operations of the Moorish Divine National Movement with your comprehension of many of these words and phrases, because you will see that many of them are operative and have been operative, but have not been discussed by many people who have injured you, or have been robbing you, or have been misguiding you, etc., and cheating you unbeknownst to you. This is again why many people don't get into these subject matters, or some people get very sensitive about it, because it exposes criminality on multiple levels. And so, with that, relative to other things, when we talk about cases as reference, not as sources of authority, but as reference to demonstrate or to show obligations on the part of people who say they have authority. Because very often here and there, we'll mention different law situations or cases that they may refer to as stare decisis. And so we'll share to you, or share with you, what stare decisis actually means. Stare decisis. The root word in Latin is to abide by, to adhere to, decided cases. And so this is where you have what is known as, quote unquote, established law. So look at established law, and also look at any law that you would call constitutional, distinguished from color of law, distinguished from color of authority, etc. These would be rules or principles that are not disputable. So whenever you hear of a case that's referred to as stare decisis, it can not be contradicted by any administrator or persons or body of persons claiming to be judges, etc., or any so-called courts, etc., having any delegated authority to execute or justice, or to make decisions in any law case. So stare decisis references cases that cannot be disputed in relationship to other like cases, etc. So stare decisis, the policy of stare decisis, was the policy of the courts to stand by, quote unquote, precedent, and not to disturb settled points. And then you would have different references so that you could look at different cases to see the consistency or of the likeness of principal cases that are not to be disputed. And so if you have another instance of a case that's related to a case that has been ruled or placed in stare decisis, you would already know that technically, by fact, unless you have corruption in the operations of the alleged court, that you already have a win, meaning that can't be disputed. That would be called, stare decisis cases would be called constitutionally settled cases, no longer disputable relative to any other case that's related in this nature, like that case. It is all, means it need not to be litigated. So it is the doctrine that when a court has once laid down a principle of law as applicable to a certain state of facts, it will adhere to that principle and apply it to all future cases or like cases where facts are substantially the same. And regardless of whether the parties and the property are the same. And under doctrine of stare decisis, a deliberate or solemn decision of courts made after argument on questions of law fairly arising in the case and necessary to its determination is an authority or binding precedent in the same court or in other courts of equal or lower rank in subsequent cases where the very point is again in controversy. And so, stare decisis is the doctrine, is one of policy grounded on theory that security, and certainly required that accepted and established legal principle under which rights may accrue be recognized and followed through later, though later found to be not legally sound. But whether previous holding of court shall be adhered to, modified, or overruled is within the court's discretion under circumstances of cases of each case before it. So under the stare decisis doctrine, when a point of law has been settled by decision, it forms precedence, which is not afterwards to be departed from, and while it should ordinarily be strictly adhered to, there are occasions when departure is rendered necessary to vindicate plain, obvious principles of law and remedy continued injustice. And so the stare decisis doctrine is a solitary one and should not ordinarily be departed from when decisions of long standing and rights have been acquired under it, unless consideration of public policy demanded. And so you have many cases that you can refer to have a better comprehension of the principles of stare decisis. And so federal courts should, in all instances, follow the law of the state with respect to the construction of state statutes, and where that law has been determined by the courts of last resort, their decisions are stare decisis and must be followed, irrespective of federal courts' opinions concerning what the law ought to be. But with respect to the pronouncement of other state courts, federal courts are not so bound and may conclude that decision does not truly express the state law, etc. So essentially, stare decisis is harmonic with constitutional principles, and once those principles are established, you have multiple cases which will be listed as stare decisis as examples for you to look at and for you to review. And if cases come up of similar nature and of like nature, etc., the fundamental principle is that the fundamental precedent of law shall be held and shall be executed without interruption, without constriction, without delay, etc. So stare decisis is the established law.
I have another one for you.
Say again?
Another word. Signature versus autograph.
Versus autograph.
Well, because signature is that legal, that's a corporate signature. And when you go to a person, you say, "Can I get your autograph?"
Yes.
So that's you.
Yes.
The signature is the legal.
Yes. Legal process distinguished. Yes. And so you have classification relative, and this is back to people really having a comprehension of the semantic deceit on how person is used.
Right.
Or the natural being, the natural person being a living, breathing man, woman, or child, and the corporate person being a legal ens legis construct constructed by the corporate state operatives, etc., for usually spurious or less than honorable intent, etc., and is indeed not the living sentient man or woman. And this is where often they use what you many of you already know when you hear the man of straw issue or straw man. That's what that is.
Also, name.
Huh.
Name.
Name also the same thing. Name means corporation unless otherwise so noted. Then this is back to where you have the semantic deceit, where the people are not told that when in trust of government, etc., persons who claim to be government, when they ask you what is your name, the semantic deceit is that they're not telling the people that they're asking you what is your corporation. And now, as soon as you talk corporation, now you're talking a foreign entity. And remember this: whenever you hear them say the word corporation, put right behind it in parentheses Vatican. If you keep that in mind, whenever you hear someone say corporation or LLC, follow it with property of Vatican, quote unquote, property of the Vatican and the Bishopric of Rome. All corporate entities constructed in the modern era are the property of Rome and are treated accordingly. And logically, this has much to do with a lot of the economic distress that people are suffering and not having a clear comprehension of what's happening to them. Even when they send people foreign bills of exchange and say that you owe them a tax on income, and the people don't know that they're lying, that they just listed you as a foreign corporation doing business in their private port, birthing in their private port, and that's the basis of what income is. It has nothing to do with anything else. It has nothing to do with wages or pecuniary compensation for you, for your labor, for someone else. Has absolutely no connection whatsoever. However, the semantic deceit is that the criminals operating as government, personating as government, have been training the people over generations that their labor was and is income, and that their pecuniary compensations for their labor on a job, etc., is income. All of that is an absolute lie. It's not a misjudgment. It's an absolute lie, absolute semantic deceit, absolute criminal theft. And they've been doing it for generations.
It's also interesting to note that the Latin word for crown is corona.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Corona also is. Yes, it is. And remember, crown, and again, like we talked about before, many people think that when you hear the word crown that they're talking about the Queen of England, etc. But they need to understand the crown is actually the lawyers, the attorneys, and the esquires are the crown. So the concepts even about the crown, as you can see, among the people, there's severe semantic deceit. Because as the people started learning about the corruption of colonial powers, they would always reference the Queen of England, wouldn't they? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not know that the lawyer that they hired to do things are the crown. So you can see how this thing has been inculcated and entrenched in society, and by people not being aware of it, they actually hire the crown to protect them from the crown. So you can figure that out. And so you can see also why many people who have been aware of these facts don't tell you that when they start telling you they're going to take you through some legal process, some commercial process with these members of the crown to retrieve your birthright and your liberties, that without telling you the truth, the matter that they have you misrepresented in a false platform, that you will never win in that platform. This is again why it has been extremely important for the people to know how these things operate, and that the people have a right of reversion of estate, and that's what must be done, because you must come out of the false platform jurisdiction in your operations. This has much to do why over the years we've always encouraged people to start studying, to start writing writs and start doing reversion of estate, because the nature of the redemption or restoration or restitution of your lost estate cannot be done in the Crown's platform. It can't be done, and it won't be done. Not in that platform. And this is, in principle, when you hear the phrase, you can't serve two masters, that's what it means. But many people have been deceived into thinking that the political platform and the human trafficking venues that have been misrepresented as courts to them, thinking that they were actually constitutional courts, when in fact they were not and are not. They are actually private human trafficking administrative venues for trafficking and trade. There has not, and we've reminded people of this so that their concepts will be correct, that there haven't been lawful courts operating on the land of North America since 1789. That's a fact. That is an absolute fact.
Now, here's something that's interesting from the word convict. So with convict, so we know who they normally call a convict, somebody. But I'm reading something that says that you have to really you have to split it in half into con and vict, and then put the vict in front of the con. And what you really get is that the prefix vict is derived from the Latin root word vict, meaning conquer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is related to the root word vince. This is where we get the word victim from, right?
Yes.
The definition of the word victim is a person who is deceived or cheated, as by his or her own emotions or ignorance, by the dishonesty, right, of others, or by some impersonal agency or person or animal sacrifice, or regarded as sacrifice. So to connect the dots, a convict or a convict or a vict con, which is what they really do reverse it,
yes,
is a victim of a con who has been conquered, deceived, and sacrificed due to his or her ignorance. This is the covert or occult definition of the word convict. So what is the con? The con is the legal system. Convicts are victims of the con known as the legal system, which is a system created by the flesh and blood minions of the dark forces to con people, excuse me, to give their natural rights and spiritual powers away to the
and
dead.
There you go with the natural law. And another, that's a good example to show people the principle of what is known as semantic deceit.
Mm-hmm.
Just like birthing of ship, BERTH, and birth, BIRTH, and the presentment of birth certificates. So a certificate is an instrument of commerce. Means if you see the word certificate, it means instrument for trade. And so a birth certificate is actually trading humans. And then the semantic deceit, harmonic with what you just demonstrated, Dr. Naila,
Mm-hmm.
is people think that the birth certificate, they're talking about the natural birth given by a living woman from her womb of her offspring or seed or living child, distinguished from the ship or the breaking or the parting of the water,
Mm-hmm.
and the ship of state or the vessel being the body on the waters of the seas of the Holy See, who have claimed themselves as God and is actually claiming the bottomry instrument or the cargo of the birthing mother as shipping, and then they use the bottomry instrument for cargo at the bottom of a ship, which is what a birth certificate is.
Yes. So,
But they don't tell the people, and that's part of what you call semantic deceit. The same way they do with income, and people think they have income and they don't have one piece of stock of any foreign entity in some foreign port. And yet they will say, I have income. Just like we were talking earlier today, when we were talking about income.
right.
And that's semantic deceit right along with what you just demonstrated. And so a lot of these things must be corrected with our people because they just don't know that these people who claim to be government has really been organized criminals and are absolutely their enemies right within. And that's the truth. It's not opinion, and it's absolute provable truth. And the evidence is actually, once people start studying, the evidence is actually before them. One thing is for sure, by their experience in their economic, social, political condition, it actually can't be denied. But people will deny it because they are still in a psychology of avoiding taking responsibility for their lives. And by virtue of not taking responsibility for their lives, they're accused of consenting to the fraud, which they're not, but it's called, tacit acquiescence.
Yeah, so here's something that just what you were talking about. A certificate of manifest is basically a birth certificate.
Yes.
On your birth certificate, there's
it's not yours. Remember, that's their birth certificate.
On that birth certificate, there's a registration number, a country of origin, a manufacturer. Metaphorically speaking, the manufacturers created you,
man-made.
That your parents. No, the manufacturers in this case are the parents they're considering.
That's why they're classified as corpses or corporation in order to accuse them of manufacturing rather than genetically creating, molding, formulating the replication of their own genetic structure by divine law and nature.
Right. So
there you go back to nature's law.
Yeah, how they do this. So when your mother, when you're in your mother's womb, they consider you surrounded in the amniotic fluid, you're being in seawater. So in other words, they say that because you were living in water according to Admiralty law, the law of the sea, you could be ruled under this law.
And then they take you off the land. Now we get back to the semantic deceit about jurisdiction, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
And this is why they don't teach fundamental civics with in personam jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, and territorial jurisdiction, and all the subcategories relative to the same.
Whoa.
And this is also the criminality taking place in our communities where they set people in place to, rather than tell our people the truth, they do what the bar members of the Circle Church and Chancery have been doing and have been exploiting the injury of our people rather than trying to liberate them. As an example, setting them through processes, commercial processes, and charging them hundreds or thousands of Federal Reserve notes, claiming they're going to become executor of their own estate, when the fact of the matter is, by right, they should be. But by color of law and the platforms that they're entering into, it is impossible because the platform itself is a fraud. And this is, again, why over the generations that people who have been working hard to restore their estates have always failed. They're not a really failure, is that they've been playing with a marked deck. And with absolute criminals that must be removed. This is, again, and this is redundant, Dr. Naila, why over the years we've always insisted that the people enforce courts of diversity. Because they'll never get justice in the commercial courts of human trafficking of the demon operations of the Pope of Rome. It will never happen. It will not be allowed to happen. However, to study it is important because they need to get some experience in recognizing the criminality. Because you can tell them, but they just don't believe it. But experiencing is like showing them, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And if you notice that people who have been also taking advantage of the misrepresentations against our people have set up little shops and doing things and charging people hundreds of notes in the name of doing things so-called proper processes, etc., without telling the people that no matter what you do in a false platform, it will come out colored. That you must remove yourself from the artificial platform and get on a de jure platform and enforce it, because that right already exists with you. You don't need them to claim a right. You need only to notify them that you're exercising the right and that you're actually firing them. Because basically, like over the land, as people have been nationalizing over the years, many of them not aware that by doing that, they're in fact firing these people. This is another reason why they're upset, because that's what kills the bottom instruments. Because remember, it still comes back to trust. And even though they're impersonating, the fact of the matter is that the bottom instruments that they've been selling off Water Street, etc., from the mortgages to the birth certificates to the CDLs and other instrumentalities, etc., are dead. So logically, this is problematic for them. So they don't want the people to be thinking in any kind of manner relative to self-governance, not for real. And this is again why we're sharing some of these words and phrases with the people so they can be familiar with them, because they're going to need to use a lot of these words and phrases for reversion of their estates and also to counter any assumed jurisdiction powers assumed by these persons who have been claiming to be government, many of whom will be proven to be criminals. As a matter of fact, as things unfold, it'd be hard pressed for you to get 1% of anyone who claims to be government. It'd be hard pressed to find 1% of anyone in these so-called state, federal, and municipal governments who is not a criminal. And that's a fact. So if the people have any idea or any will in their mind that they're going to go through these people and through any process with them by any application whatsoever to restore their rights or liberties, that they're sorely mistaken. It's not going to happen. Because the platform itself is false and corrupt. Everything that's constructed in color will remain in color. However, over the years, as people have interfaced with them, they themselves, the experiences that they themselves are showing you their corruption. And that exercise also is a lesson or learner, or what you call wake-up call. And the reality is, because so many people are becoming national in their state of mind and their activity is what is bringing down the corrupt system. because it can't operate with people being conscious. They must be in the dark.
This is interesting. Can I share this
Yes,
about the birth
please do.
certificate? let me share this with regard to the birth certificate process. Before the invention of computers, when babies were born, hospitals published their birth information in the newspaper. Nowadays, because of computers, the internet, and certain laws, they rarely publish birth information in the newspaper. Instead, they send birth information to the government, and then its agents publish it on certain government-sponsored websites. Some examples of these websites are vital records websites. In the United States, shortly after a baby is born, the doctor extracts blood from the bottom of the baby's foot.
Yes.
This
Foundation.
process, often called the heel stick test, the bottom of the foot is known as the sole, S-O-L-E, of the foot. Keep in mind that the word soul, S-O-L-E, sounds very similar to the word soul, S-O-U-L.
Yes.
Most doctors do not know the real reason.
Yes, they do.
Wait a minute, let me finish. Most doctors do not know the real reason behind this procedure. So if your parents ask them why they do this, they will most likely tell your parents that they extract your blood to test it for genetic conditions and diseases. Blood extracting, besides extracting your blood, they also take tissue samples and blood from your mother's placenta. The purpose of taking your blood is to extract your DNA from it.
Exactly.
And shortly after extracting blood from the sole of your foot, the blood is sent to the government so its agents can sequence your DNA to determine your genetic blueprint. Your genetic blueprint is like your fingerprint because no one else has that same genetic blueprint. Because of this, your DNA is the physical proof of evidence that the government can use to identify you. Shortly after the government is done sequencing your DNA and creating your personal file, they publish your birth information on some of the websites that they sponsor. What they are basically doing is telling the public that they found parts of you and someone needs to claim them. It is like a lost and found service. If no one claims them after a certain amount of time, usually 7 years, the government has the legal right to pronounce you as legally dead. The problem with this process is that it's based on false presumptions and fraudulent contracts, and therefore the government is basically committing fraud. Fraud vitiates everything. But does the government really care about that? Not really. For that reason, they make millions of dollars off you from this fraud. Be aware that when the government announces you as being legally dead, it does not always mean that you, the living man or woman, are dead. In law, you can be alive and still be called legally dead. Being legally dead can mean that you're
civil little mortus.
That your fictional character, for example, legal name, and afterbirth material are dead.
Yes. That's a straw. Now, this is back to even in the law of contracts where people have said and have been promoting that your mother sold you to the corporate state by virtue of the birth certificate based on that contract. Keep in mind, when any principle of the establishment of contract violates the rule or the law of contract, it is not a contract. Therefore, contract doesn't exist for them to argue they're doing human trafficking, and that is it. And this is, again, where people who know these facts keep putting a burden on the people that they have to go through some secret, discover the secrets of the dark priesthood and go through a process to undo the fraud created by someone else, and that if you don't artfully dissemble the fraud created by such persons relative to the marriage certificates, the birth certificates, etc., therefore they own you, therefore you are a corpse, or therefore you are a corporation. No, that's a claim they made. You're never any of those things, and such what's spurious, misrepresented contracts don't construct or change the nature of natural law.
Someone was asking where this
fathers were and are by no doubt or contradiction.
Someone was asking where this came from that I was reading. those of you who have gotten the flash drive, USB drive, I'm not going to name it, but it is on in the folder House of Reawakening Minds. So there's like 8 folders on there, and it is there. And so starts with the word. So if you have the flash drive, USB drive, and you look under the House of Reawakening Minds folder, and you got your drive, say in the last 6-8 months or more, it's in that folder, and it's a PDF. I have the book, but it's a PDF there.
And so the nature of what you're discussing is called semantic deceit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's back to where people have been convinced fraudulently by people that these instruments, which are based in color, have placed an obligation on you. They have not. You don't accept it. This is again why we keep telling people you rebut and you do a reversion of a state. Notice how we're redundant with some of these things.
But what that means is, from what I read, that if parents had this armed with that knowledge, when their children, I don't even want to call them parents, but when their children are born in that first year or so, they need to be claiming them, armed with this knowledge. In the first, it's after 7 years, they're legally dead.
Now, notice how the presentment is implied that the parents have an obligation that they neglected relative to the knowledge.
But they didn't know it.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Why did they not know it? It was not revealed to them, and the information relative to those instruments, their function, their use, their application, was never told to the people. As a matter of fact, it was misrepresented as something else. Therefore, it is a fraud. And no obligation or duty exists on the part of the parent to claim anything or to undo anything, but to rebut them. And this is back to, what I reject, where people keep saying, because your mom got a birth certificate, didn't claim the DNA that they stole from the baby.
And the mother.
And the misrepresentation, therefore an obligation of your life now exists on you, delivering yourself, your estate, your labor, etc., to the popes of Rome and to the Circle Church and Chancery of the Lawyers Bar Association, by which the actual poverty of all the people on the planet has its basis. Because that's basically what it is, including your life. And unless you jump through some hoop that they also didn't reveal to you, that it stands and that you stand as serf or property, dead property, civil little mortuus of the Pope of Rome and the bishopric, etc., and they have right to run the stock market on you, etc., and you have no recourse except you apply to them through whatever processes they may present to you with some uniform commercial codes or some other instrumentality or process in violation of contract law, etc., and then that an obligation exists on you. I declare that it does not exist on you. It creates no authority. It creates no office. It creates no obligation on the part of the people, and that the duty and responsibility of the people themselves is to rebut them. And in fact, by rule of law, it is severe malfeasance, severe misprision, severe treason, and if anything, there should be a rope collection. That's a fact.
I probably stopped you from your words. You were going through the definitions, so I'll just interject later on.
Say it again.
I know you were going through the words that you gave out, so I know you want to give them the definitions for more of those words, right?
For which one?
The ones you gave out at the beginning.
Oh, yes. But again, like I was saying, if so many of them, we can't go through all of them. I wanted to give, as we're doing now, an example, or pick out some words and present it to them. And we present this to them for them to do the research on their own, but we're sending out the definitions of some of these words to show you the mission of this conversation that we're having tonight and how relevant it is to everybody, while many of the people have been deceived into thinking that this is some more science information that has nothing to do with them, which is one of the biggest frauds to ever be perpetrated against humanity. Has everything to do with them.
Government or official person. Even, somebody put in the chat about, government, which reads what? To govern
your mind.
Your mind, your mental.
Govern your mind. Because it's all about mind control. And this is back to, again, and Dr. Naila, and this is, again, it doesn't frustrate me because I understand the mind control psychic attack systems. Why certain things have to be redundantly presented to the people, because even the questions that come up and even the statements, many of them which are valid, but by the lack of activities on the parts of the people indicate that they don't get it. Because they're still they're still operating under the psychology that some savior leader is going to come and grab their hand and save them, when the deal of it is we collectively must save ourselves.
It's true.
That psychology itself is part of the suppression. This is why, from a position of analogy, we always say every man, every woman, every child must confess their own. They need to comprehend what that actually means. It's not hard to comprehend. It's just that people repeat that statement, but they don't apply it in law. They're still looking for, the sacrificial Jesus mentality type thing.
Right.
When they're going to have to start taking responsibility for their estate. And we're sharing information to, aid the people in that competence.
How about the word tenant?
Tenant. Oh, yeah. Tenant. Here we go. And keep this in mind when they're issuing what they call mortgages to the people, that the people are listed as tenants. And the people have been deceived in thinking that they are owners of property via the mortgages and the deeds, when actually they're tenants.
Yep. I have the definition.
Yes.
You have a definition.
Huh?
I have a definition here. If you want.
Go ahead.
So a tenant is defined as an individual who occupies or possesses land or premises by way of a grant of an estate of some type, such as in fee, for life, for years, or at will. A person who has the right to temporary use and possession of particular real property which has been conveyed to that person by a landlord. Another definition of the word tenant is, quote unquote, a person who occupies real property owned by another based upon an agreement between the person and the landlord owner, almost always for rental payments.
So now you have what? A sharecropping agreement.
Right. You do not legally own your house and land.
No, you do not lawfully.
Lawfully, yeah. Own your house or land, and you're required to pay rent, which is the interest of the mortgage.
And that's what the tax is.
Yes.
So you can see that's semantic deceit, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So people.
And then but before you go there, but to make matters worse, they draw from your account, right, to pay for the loan, and then make you pay it back as a gift, right?
Yes. It's called dedonus. That's why you see that on those mortgage and deed papers. Dedonus. Keep that in mind.
A gift.
This stuff is redundant, but you can see the problem that we have here.
Someone asked, how do we become owners?
It's called allodial. That's why we mentioned that. Now, give them allodial.
Allodial. And some of you are asking me to ask some questions of Grand Sheik that are not relevant to the subject matter. We'll get to them if we can at the end. But the reason why I'm not asking you a question, if it's not about words and phrases, I'm trying to stick with that right now. Just so you know.
So allodial means free and not beholden to any lord or superior, owned without obligation or vassalage or fealty. So allodial is the opposite of feudal. So when people talk about free and don't associate it with allodial, you can see why they don't make that known to the people. So you have continuous semantic deceit, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't hear them talking about when people. Now, also when you do the research, Dr. Naila, and this is redundant again, when we remind the people that in 1913, when Woodrow Wilson met with the bankers and the people who like to call them a certain religious persuasion, which they are not, at Jekyll Island, that they constructively dismantled instrumentalities of what is known as Aboriginal titles and allodial titles away from the public and has not been taught to the public since. And they converted them to mortgages and deeds. That's 1913. That's not even 2 centuries, is it?
No.
And why is it that the people aren't familiar with allodial title? So if you're talking about owning property and you don't have Aboriginal title or allodial title, you don't own property. There it is.
Well, with regard to the banks, court, like I said, you already said this, but courts are also banks, which is why they have benches and bars. And one of the origins of the word bench is derived from the old High German word bank, meaning bench. In English, the word bank can mean a few different things. One of its meanings is an institution for receiving, lending, exchanging, and safeguarding money, and in some cases, issuing notes and transacting other financial businesses. The word bank can also, as we said, mean a bench for rowers in a galley or a row of tiers of oars or the sloping side of any hollow in the ground, especially when bordering. Anyway, hence the word riverbank. The word galley is defined as a seagoing vessel propelled mainly by oars used in ancient medieval times, sometimes with the aid of sails. Back in the old days, galleys were often rowed by slaves or convicts, as we said. Yeah. So a lot of the words that have these other, darker meanings are words we use today, not knowing that the spelling words.
What's called semantic deceit.
Yeah.
And this is this is old information for most of you. A lot of the people who are coming on board need to know this because many of our families are suffering for lack of knowledge.
Oh, they're asking. Someone's asking if you could spell some of the words. I guess if you tell Didonus. Let me see. What was that word? Fakwa. I don't know what fakwa is.
Smells just like it.
Didonus is what?
It sounds like
Dedonis?
Yes.
I don't know what this other word she put up.
Sometimes they'll spell it with a double N.
What is that? D.
Yeah.
D-E.
Like donate. That's where the word donate comes from.
Okay. Didonus. How does the world, mostly asleep, myself included, wake up and become owners, or allodial just declare it or request it from the crown? I don't know. Mingle. The great navel protects the Moors, someone said. Well, that navel is the umbilical cord is attached to the navel.
Yes. And then look at this. What you keep discovering as we go over these things, what is it that is underlying, and then many people keep missing it, is that these people who've been governing their lives as their enemy.
Yep.
And and how much do you have to present information that's deliberately being held from the people that injures them and is coming from these people that they keep looking at as their government? Do you see the psychology, the effect of the psychic attacks, Dr. Nayo?
Yeah.
That with all this information being presented to them, they still look to these people to solve problems when they are the problem.
So there's, I used to think, not used to, but I began to think after I was awakening to what really might have been going on, even in some of the tales in the Bible, which we know come from other things. But the account of the flood and Abraham, taking his children, taking two of every, whoever took it, I don't even know. Whoever, I forgot now. When they were taking the two of every animal,
Yes.
7 of every clean and 2 of every unclean animal, which turned out to be more like a genetic deposits, as opposed to DNA deposits, as opposed to actual physical animals. We used to, we were thinking, like,
Yes.
how do they live with all it? No, because they took DNA samples.
Yes.
By the same token, the DNA sampling, the same process is used today and has been used, like I said, when they take blood and they take samples of the placenta and so forth. That's not just to say they own us, but that's also to identify us for other things. What's going on now.
They've been using the DNA to construct viruses, other poisons to wage war against the people, and the people have been giving them willingly their information.
Well, like I said, parents don't know generally that that's what's going on.
Well, it's been going on.
Right, but they don't know.
And even the fact that when you get into these subject matters, that they're even censoring people, shows you again that they are your enemy. And this is back to, the people not being convinced that these people are their enemy. They're not your government.
Yeah, somebody mentioned the Hospitallers. Yeah, that's the Knights Templar. Hospitallers, right? Grand Sheik?
Hospitallers, yeah. As a matter of fact, that order was infiltrated by the hybrid Europeans to regulate the bank system, their banking system.
Someone asked if you could elaborate on the word escheat.
Escheat is the method or the operations of the corporate state stealing people's estate by deceit.
But the word cheat is right in there.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
It's like...
Yes. And so let's go to the law book to be more precise for the people. This is Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary, Ancient and Modern Jurisdiction, jurisprudence, pardon me, page 641, 640, fourth edition. Escheat. In feudal law, escheat is an obstruction of the natural course of descent and the consequent determination of the tenure by some unforeseen contingency, in which case the land naturally results back by a kind of reversion to the original grantor or lord of the fee. So the corporate state, being a part of the bank, i.e., a part of the bench of the popes of Rome, by claiming the bodies and the souls of the people, are claiming all your property by escheat, at will. And this is how they've also been gentrifying our communities, misclassifying our people, and the people not rebutting it or declaring their nationality. And then they're cheating your estates by claiming you to be corporate operatives of a foreign entity, alien, operating in their foreign port, etc., and therefore are subject to duties and other costs, etc., that they impose on the people according to shipping. That's a fact. And they've been cheating us for generations.
Wow. Any more questions? Get that. The preacher from Jekyll is a crazy man. Okay, Shaquille asks, can you speak on the words citizen and civilian?
All right.
Okay. Citizenship.
Citizen. This would be on page 310, fourth edition, Black's Law Dictionary, Henry Campbell Black's Ancient and Modern Jurisprudence. Citizen. A member of a free city or jural society, civitas, that's where it's rooted in, possessing all the rights and privileges which can be enjoyed by any person under its constitution and government, and subject to the corresponding duties. Quote unquote, citizens are members of community inspired by common goal, who in associated relations submit themselves to rules of conduct for the promotion of the general welfare and conservation of individual as well as collective rights, etc. Now, of course, when the people claim to be citizens of the U.S. corporation, because it's not a country, you can only be their stock. And this has been the semantic deceit that has been presented in the name of civilian.
So here's something to add to that, that the process of using ships to deliver products is where the word shipping comes from. And did you notice that the word shipping has the word ship in it? Another
Yes.
word that has word ship is citizenship. And when you split the word citizenship
Now,
into two
exactly.
words, it transferred forms
That's a compound word.
Yeah, it transforms into the word citizenship, meaning a citizen of a ship. A citizen of a ship means that you are under the jurisdiction of admiralty law
There we
and
go.
maritime law. These two laws are not common laws or constitutional laws.
Now,
Instead,
again,
they are commercial laws.
Isn't that semantic deceit?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Let's see if there are any more questions. And I think the other one was, what was the other word?
Now, what else was that?
I don't even know. I was. Let's see. Yeah, that's right. Word magic.
So in the matter of civics, it pertains to a citizen or the city or citizen or the citizenship, and this is relationship logically between government and the people. And therefore, you must be clear, you must be very clear of the specific nation state that you are claiming to be a subject or a citizen of, distinguished from any corporate entity. And this is back to where they have been cleverly misrepresenting the United States Corporation Company since the 1860s as the country. And the people have been deceived into thinking or agreeing to be citizens of the U.S. corporation. Not only that, not knowing that the United States has multiple meanings, and it doesn't mean necessarily what they think it means. Now, again, to help many of you, here is the lawful dispensation of the United States. United States is a political term. This term has several meanings. The United States may be merely the name of a sovereign occupying the position analogous to that of other sovereigns in families of nations. It may designate territory over which sovereignty of the United States extends, or it may be the collective name of the states which are united by and under the Constitution. And so your concepts of, as soon as someone say the USA or the United States, you're assuming that it means a nation state, and it does not necessarily mean that. It has multiple meanings. So whenever someone presents the United States to you, tell them to clarify, because it definitely means multiple things.
Here's another question. Is foreclosure another name for eviction?
Yes. Not only that, in the process of them alleging that you have closed an agreement in so-called the assumption of purchase of property, etc., or estate or land, etc., if it was closed, how can you have a foreclosure after closure? It even is contradiction of logic, which means the deal was never really settled or closed. Therefore, there's deception in the construction of the papers, isn't there?
So here's a question. I'll just ask it. If a property was lost in the foreclosure process and sold at auction, after getting your allodial title and nationality, can the property be reclaimed?
Yes, by right of law, yes, it can be and should be. The problem that we have is that the platforms of the de facto venues are not lawful courts. This is, again, why diversity of nationality should be enforced, which is the established law. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution for the United States invokes all the obligations and duties of government relative to diversity, which is again why they don't want constitutions enforced. They actually have our people in false venues and have been denying them due process. And when they go into those venues, this is why the people keep losing.
Question: can you define sovereign?
Sovereign, we're going to go into the law and show you what sovereign is. Sovereign is a person or body or state in which independent and supreme authority is vested. A chief ruler with superior power, a king or other ruler with limited power, etc. So sovereignty is the supreme, the absolute, and the uncontrollable power by which any independent state is governed, supreme political authority, paramount control of the Constitution and frame of government and its administration, the self-sufficient source of political power from which all specific political powers are derived. The international independence of a state combined with the right and the power of regulating its internal affairs without foreign dictation. Also, a political society or state which is sovereign and independent. The power to do everything in a state without accountability, to make laws, to execute and to apply them, to impose and collect taxes, and to levy contributions, to make war or peace, and to form treaties or alliances or of commerce with foreign nations and the like. Sovereignty, quote unquote, in government is that public authority which directs or orders what is to be done by each member associated in relation to the end of the association. It is the supreme power by which any citizen is governed and is the person or the body of persons in the state to whom there is political or politically no superior. The necessary existence of the state and that right and power which necessarily follow is sovereignty, etc. And sovereignty is the natural divine right of the being coming from the creator, etc., and is agreed when one is a party to a governing body to execute by that constitutional order. This is what constitutions are for, and limited by it to exercise such powers for the good and the welfare of the grand body as well as the single unit, etc. Never in contradiction to natural law. So sovereignty essentially is the divine right of being agreed by constitutional principle in association with others to execute in the name of government, i.e. the people. So sovereignty does not originate with government. Sovereignty establishes the authority that government uses. And it comes from the people, unalienable. It has no lien on it. It cannot be sold, cannot be transferred to another, and cannot be owned by government, but is essentially lent, if you might say, by the people to government with limited authority to execute the will of the people.
So when they say sovereign citizen,
that's a contradiction.
That's what I say. Yeah,
it's an oxymoron. Sovereignty is divine.
So Duque says, how can one claim citizenship when the Dred Scott versus Sanford case has not been challenged?
Why would you? Because that's the private corporation. The reality is that the plaintiff in error issue with Dred Scott is certainly valid. See, our concepts of what it is wrong. So we have expectations, or we keep trying to be a part of something that we're not a part of. And thinking that we're being violated. We can't be. We are the natural nationals of the land. The United States is a corporate platform of hybrid Europeans doing business in our land under obligations and limitations of treaty and contract and constitution. You can't be citizens of the occupational power.
Unless you naturalize, right?
Unless you're naturalized. That's why it says in the rules of citizenship that the Moors lost their nationality only by being naturalized, which means 14th Amendment. That's how you lost your nationality. That's documented. Remember we read that before in the treaty book. Do you have that? You know, and notice, Dr. Naila, how some of these things, like we say, are so obvious. And even though we go over them again and again and again, let me take the whole tray. I'll give it to me. I'll get it. That stuff should be up on the shelf. These books, you need them on the shelf so you can get to them instead of stack like that. Now keep this in mind, you all. See, by us being trained under semantic deceit of being or trying to be U.S. citizens, we kept trying to be in a political platform that is contradictory to our political reality. It's sort of like with Dred Scott trying to be a U.S. citizen is like saying, I want to fight. I'm going to go to court so I can be your legal slave. You don't belong in this party. You can deal with them by treaty. You can't be a U.S. citizen. Can't. Now,
what did the prophet mean when he called?
That's why people need, state that, because people need to know that, because that creates contrast.
Right, because a citizen, we are citizens of the United States Republic.
It doesn't say United
America.
States.
It says U.S. It says U.S.
Never said that.
What does it say? U.S.
It says, sit on the nationality card. I am a citizen of the USA.
Yeah. Right?
And
that stands for what?
That's on the charter of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which is unity, salvation, Allah. That's the USA. Now, in relationship to citizenship of the United States and repatriation, etc., which is page 459, which you will see in the treaty book, which is why I did this book years ago. And remember when I told you that when I collected this information from the Library of Congress, I even kept the print. I did a photo of the print. I didn't even retype it. That's the photo of the actual print. So in relationship to Morocco, there he is. You see right there, citizen of the United States, expatriation, etc. Page 459, Chapter 5, Temporary Provisions, Morocco. Mr. Phillip charged the affairs to Mr. Root, Secretary of State, August the 3rd, 1906, American Legation, Tangier. And remember the treaty that Obama talked about. August the 3rd, 1906. Sir, there are strictly speaking no Moroccan laws relating to citizenship of Moorish subjects in Morocco. The fundamental laws of this non-Christian country are based entirely upon the Islamic code, no part of which treats of the subject of citizenship. No part of which treats of the subject of citizenship. Page 460. Citizenship of the United States, expatriation, etc. There are, however, numerous treaties and conventions between the various Christian countries and the Moorish Empire, by means of which citizenship in this country is defined. But as I understand from the above acknowledged instructions that it is not the desire of the department to call for a report upon such lines, I will therefore confine these remarks to general conditions existing, which may possibly be of some use in connection with the information desired. Number one, citizenship in Morocco may be said to be governed by the laws pertaining to the same in other countries, with the exception that all persons residing in Morocco who cannot prove foreign citizenship or protection are considered ipso jure as Moorish subjects. Number 2 and 3, Moorish subjects lost their nationality only by becoming naturalized in or protected by another country having treaty relations with the Moorish Empire. It was established by the Convention of Madrid, concluded July the 3rd, 1880. There we go. So you can see the 14th Amendment, which is naturalization, distinguished from nationalization, deals with foreign aliens in another political jurisdiction. This is why Noble Drew Ali said, declare your nationality. It brings you out of that straw status of the 14th Amendment. It is your right. It is your duty to claim it. It is not an option, except if you want to be a subject of the United States corporation operations, which is what's been happening to our people. I.e., so in the divine warning, the prophet said what? Since that constitution has never changed, you see the whole point? But they changed it, didn't they? You see the point? He knew that when you studied, you would find that out. And so we're dealing with these problems we're dealing with today. And people on both sides have been deceiving our people and promoting or capitalizing on the injury of our people with a bunch of corrupt processes that they've been selling to you for hundreds and thousands of notes, pretending that they would solve the problem when the Prophet Noble Drew Ali solved the problem in the first place. All we needed to do was carry out the law like he told us to. And this is again why many criminals among our own keep misrepresenting Prophet Noble Drew Ali, saying that he's not a prophet, saying that he didn't set up government correctly, etc. And he told you that the half has not been told. And he told you that people among your own was trying to put you back into servitude. However, due to the operations and things that are taking place now in the consciousness of the people I was raising, even these people around you are now being exposed. This is again why a lot of them are angry too. But they can't stop what's coming now, because all of this stuff is being exposed, including them. And what I read to you is documented fact. It's not opinion, documented fact. So how can Dred Scott, who's clearly of Moorish descent, be a U.S. corporate citizen when the corporation is a conglomerate of corporations owned by the Pope of Rome, registered in Austria, and operating at North America under treaty, which they've been breaching and violating? So the plaintiff was in error, wasn't he? Oh, yes, he was. And we're sitting around talking about racism and you see the problem with how they have actually distorted the narrative, Dr. Naila, and we've been actually begging to be slaves and subjects to a foreign corporation thinking it's a country because it hasn't dawned on us yet the clarification of these semantic deceits, and people among our own have been misrepresenting it to us. And this is back to some of the conversation that we had earlier when I was telling you how people have been misrepresenting Noble Drew Ali and then accusing him of violating us when actually he set us on a course of study that we would liberate ourselves. That's why he said, if I could just get you all thinking again, you'd free yourselves. Why do you think members of the Bar Association infiltrated the Moorish movement, and then they also had people work with them infiltrate the Moorish movement and start selling people different processes for $3,400, and talking about they're going to do trust, etc., for people rather than tell them the truth? Because you can't play on the opposite side of the chessboard and win. The fraud abounds among us, Dr. Nayela. But again, and this is back to if we can get our people to really start looking at these things and comprehending, they can vet these people from among us and root them out because they're part of the problem. Why do you think all of a sudden, Dr. Nayela, a lot of the agents that were placed among us are now exposing themselves openly and trying to discredit Prophet Noble Drew Ali? Because of the economic pressures of the banking systems that are collapsing. Remember I said about 4 years ago, I said for everybody watch Deutsche Bank?
Yes, I remember.
I suggest now watch Deutsche Bank and watch the things that take place. I said it 4 or 5 years ago, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you did.
And many people around us that we thought was helpful, their economics are going to be kind of interrupted. And so you see them coming out of the woodwork, pulling their mask off openly. Now they're openly trying to misrepresent Noble Drew Ali, aren't they? They're not even hiding it, are they? Because their claims, their dedonuses they see the threat. See, because they produce nothing else. Keep this in mind. Everybody that came into the Moorish movement is not really for uplifting fallen humanity. Many people came into this movement for the specific purpose of pretending to be friends with the intention of trying to undermine the divine national movement. Everything is infiltrated. So let's get that clear. That is the operation of COINTELPRO. That's automatic. The deal of it is, how do you vet? How do you make distinctions between who's who? That's why it's important that we share these words and phrases and also these principles with you redundantly, so that a lot of the questions wouldn't even come up if the people really comprehended or understood what we've been telling them for 40 years. And many people come in at different points of time. However, the fundamental principles don't change. This is why you see me not getting tempted to be distracted on a lot of different things, because you already know yourself. I have a lot of information, a lot of books. I have a lot of knowledge on a lot of things, a lot of disciplines, but you'll see me focus on certain things redundantly, because if you don't fix the foundation, everything else falls apart.
Right.
And if people get the foundation, most of the other stuff, it becomes obvious and you don't need the questions. It's about liberating people. It's not about making followers.
And I've been around you long enough now, 10 years, to like you said, when you said, had you not said something about Deutsche Bank, watch Deutsche Bank. Several things that you cautioned and warned us about, in the last 10 years, I've seen come to pass. And this is like, it was all leading up to, what they say, the time that we're in now, for such a time as this. But you said it when it didn't even seem, when there was no clouds in the sky, you said it was going to rain.
And this is by meaning that if you have certain reference points that people aren't paying attention to, right? You look at patterns, things become obvious. Like cause and effect, 2 and 2 makes 4. You don't, if somebody says 2 and 2 makes 3.5, you can doubt that, right? Well, 2 and 2 makes 4. You can kind of stand on that wherever you are. if you comprehend. And once you comprehend or know, like we've been telling people for years, and you know how much criticism we've gotten from people so-called conscious and people, some people in temples and some people in other organizations, when we've been telling people for years that the United States is not a country, it's a private corporation. Recently, the people of that platform have been forced to admit it because they went bankrupt. But how many people came out and knocked us and criticized us and said we were lying when we told the people that the United States is not a country? And it came from people who you might consider grand governors of the Moore Science Temple and other people who were happy to jump on and say, who them Tajites? As if I was making it up. That's established law, established information. However, not being taught to the people. And how many people have been injured over the years for not knowing that and keep going into those venues looking for remedies when there is no remedy in your enemy. And then getting frustrated. And then rather than admitting that the enemy is in government, they would charge us for, oh, you wrote them papers and them papers got people in trouble. I.e. the truth got people in trouble, which is a warning so that you don't go into the... You tell them that's a doo-doo pool, don't jump in the doo-doo pool, you're going to stink. Oh, he shouldn't have said that. So you now got all these people stinking, they lost their homes, now they're losing jobs because they won't take the poison and everything, and all the stuff they was warned about. Noble Drawley said over 100 years ago, he says, there's a storm out there, and the people say there is no storm. And I, the prophet, said, there's a storm right on, now we're in the storm. Now starting the hybrid Europeans admitting that there's a storm, isn't it?
Sure are.
Huh?
Yeah, they are.
Oh, yeah. But you have other traitors among our own people keep saying he wasn't a prophet, don't they? Don't you?
Yes, we do.
However, his work proves that you don't need to defend the truth. The truth stands on its own, and it needs no apology. See, and it's like I said before, Dr. Nayo. Remember I said a couple of years ago, I said, all masks are off? It's in government, it's in education, it's in the banking system, and it's in people around you. Why? Because they can't hide, but so long they got to start coming out because they got to show their allegiances, don't they?
That's right.
Because that's where their taffies are coming from, their little payoffs, isn't it? So they can't pretend, but so long. Because what did the Roman cure members say? Look, you're going to have to start kind of knocking this and slowing this stuff down and discrediting this stuff, or you won't get your little kickback in the background. So some people you thought your friends will have been secretly your enemy all the time. However, they serve their purposes like everybody else does. You know, like I used to always say, Dr. Nayo, I said, you know, I ain't trying to prove anything to anyone. I'm doing what my mother sent me to do. They got to do what their mother sent them to do. More power to them. See who wins the chess game. However, as the people are waking up, the people are going to do what? By the nature of their injury, be clear on who their alliances should actually be. You won't have to convince them of anything. You know how I say, remember I used to always say, Dr. Nail, I said, our people are going to come together not for lack of information or lack of will of men and women out there who have been sacrificing their personal lives to help uplift fallen humanity. They're going to come together out of pain. They're getting it now, aren't they? Aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Mm-hmm. And so many people are becoming conscious. Why? They're losing their homes, they're losing their accounts, they're losing their jobs, they're losing all sense of security, and all the institutions that they've trusted are failing them, aren't they? It's creating pain, isn't it? Great teacher, isn't it? Pain is a great teacher. So don't have to argue about whether we don't understand where you're coming from. You need to guide us by the hand and change our diapers. No, the hybrid's going to teach you. Rome's teaching you. Lord, many of us have been losing weight, ain't we? But we ain't been to Jenny Craig's. Because they're taking all your stuff, just like I told you they would. Now we can decide to come together and honor our mothers and fathers and start enforcing the Constitution like the prophet said, because the Constitution is really a portal to other ancient divine law. It's not the instrument itself, it's the principles behind it. Why do you think so many people around us were so upset when we started talking about constitutions? Because those dark priests know it's a portal. It's a political portal. So you don't look at the portal, you look at what's on the other side of it. A portal is only a passageway, isn't it? Isn't it? It serves a purpose, doesn't it? But it is not the thing, is it? Passage is not the goal, is it? Passage is what? Just what it says, passage. It's temporal. But its purpose is to go to another dimension or plane, isn't it? Whether abstract or political, Constitution is a portal. And this is where a lot of, criminals among us got tricked. They thought we were talking about the Constitution physically itself, weren't they? Mm-hmm. But we're talking dimensional portals. Called a higher plane of life, higher plane of thought. The conditions change. As the people change, their conditions change. And many people pass through the portal, many people don't. So we have a situation of controversy where if people don't ascend, they will be clearly destroyed, won't they? On many levels, won't they? And it's becoming clearer and more obvious, isn't it? Isn't it?
Here's a comment. I just want you to address it. Lizzie says Trump is selling us to pay his loans back. Sorry, guys.
It's interesting, but false.
I know. We so misguided on that one. That was not.
Trump is assigned, which I told you all a couple years ago, by the military. What is called Q was set up by Abraham Lincoln, the last lawful president for the United States, the Republic, which was overthrown in 1861, i.e., and it is actually a small order of officials whose missionary work has been to counter the dark priesthood and to restore the Republic. And Trump, in this day, is a part of that operation, assigned by some parts of the military that have been loyal to the Constitution for the United States, distinguished from the conversion of estates via the Constitution of the United States corporate operations of the Circle Church and Chancery. And this is the clash that you see taking place.
But they're fighting over our stuff.
Yeah, again, didn't I always say? I'd say Trump is assigned.
Yes.
Didn't I say that for the last few years?
Yes, you did.
His assignment is not for him to either be worshipped or praised or anything. He has a military mission of helping to restore the Republic, because the nations of the earth, didn't we say years ago that they was going to stop trading with them? And we say they're going to have a feedback loop with the treasury bonds that they trade with around the world. You need to look at these things, because you can't say you haven't been told, because you've been told. It's just that now it's hitting every... You know what it is, Dr. Naila? Now that it's becoming more and more open and the mask are off, people can no longer deny what is happening to all of us.
We're all feeling it.
Hmm?
We're all feeling it.
And guess what? And what's happening is they're only opening up a few pages, but it's obvious that they're opening up more pages of kick-ass, aren't they?
Yeah. Remember what I told you yesterday
Yes.
about my friend?
Yes.
Somebody we mutually know. I mean,
you know,
we can't even say what it is because
how much whoop ass cans do they need to take off the shelf and open up to convince these people that they're your enemy and not your government?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, it's sort of like, you know, they talk about the Stockholm syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Among our people, we got it in spades. It's almost like every card is a spade. I mean, and then you can see in some ways how the enemy of humanity is actually contemptuous of us due to the fact that we won't even use common sense. When the evidence is there and indisputable, we keep trying to find excuses to get around taking responsibility of reclaiming our estate, but while crying the blues about our estates being stolen.
Well, we need to do it quickly because our children are being targeted. So when you go out to the young, when you go away, but in this instance, when you go all the way out to the younger children, that means that you're trying to cut off the future. You're going to cut off the future if that's what you.
Remember what I said years ago, Dr. Nyland, when I said our people always talk about they don't fear nobody but Allah, they don't fear nobody but Jesus, they don't fear nobody but God. And the reality, everybody in their dog news that the so-called Negro God is the hybrid European. They won't buy or sell without a license or mark or number of his name, and that's who they fear.
Yeah.
But nobody's supposed to say it. And everything relative to these people claiming their right and their birthright, what is the first thing comes out of their mouth? Yeah, I won't do that because they're going to do this to you, and they're going to take this from you, and they're going to fire you from your job, and they're going to take your house. You're going to get in trouble. Who do they fear? They fear the hybrid European. They don't fear no Jesus, God, Allah. They're lying. And the deal of it is the experience is proving it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And so when they look in the book of Revelation that they won't buy or sell without the mark or the number of the beast, it's proven to be true, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true.
So who would stand up against those principalities and powers? Who would make a stand? So that's what's being deciphered now. So you're getting the separation of the wheat from the chaff. Those who are sincerely for the uplifting of fallen humanity, and those who have really been secretly against. All masks are off, which is what we talked about a couple of years ago. Because the feedback loop is on, and what's happening? The snake is eating his own tail, ain't he?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that snake in the history books?
Right.
You see it broke up, eating his own tail? Mm-hmm. Said, don't tread on me, don't it? Something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So all these symbolisms are there, but they're present too, aren't they?
Yeah.
So therefore, people in their consciousness of timeline is also been twisted, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now in order to fix this thing, they're going to have to correct the calendars too, aren't they? People don't even know that they've been.
I heard we had like 1,000 years added on or something.
Well,
like
remember what we said? Remember what we said right here in the treaty book, right? Look at this, right? Look at the treaty book, right? When you talk about the treaty, so the treaty was ratified by President Arthur St. Clair of the United States Republic in the year 1787, which corresponds with 1200. There it is in the treaty book.
Okay.
So if it's corresponding, so if it corresponds, so that means
that's like 500 years, right?
That means that 1787 is actually 1200. Didn't I put it in the book? Ain't it there? Ain't it there? Right there?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, I see it now. Which means I see it.
Oh, so have they been told? So now to fix stuff, they got to start fixing a lot more than they've been telling the people have, don't they?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Taji's been making this stuff up, right? You know, you don't have to argue about truth because guess what? When stuff falls apart, all masks go off, ain't they? Aren't they?
No, treaty books. No, the treaty book's not on the flash drive. They wanted to know what book you were referencing, but yeah. Treaty of Peace and Friendship, Constitution for the United States of America, 1786, 1787, 1836.
Superseded. Now, and that's what? Just before the ratification of the Constitution for the United States, isn't it? So we are what? The true beneficiaries and heirs, aren't we? Remember, I always said, why they've been violating the Constitution? To supersede and to undermine their obligations to the superseding treaty. There you go. So your experience is now being proved to you. I don't have to keep convincing you of anything. You know the funny thing, how people keep wanting you to apologize for telling the truth just because some people aren't on it, or some people aren't familiar, or some people are not using their intuitive mind and looking at things like they really are. And because you're willing to talk openly about it, they accuse you of making stuff up. And then when it manifests itself, they still want to find a way to discredit truth. Well, truth don't need an apology. It is what it is.
Sure.
Doo-doo stinks. So what? Get some perfume.
Truth hurts, but sometimes
it's what it is.
Pain, if the pain moves you, then that's what needs to happen.
It's hard for all of us. Just because you're aware of certain things doesn't make you absent from it.
Right. Doesn't make it easier.
It doesn't. It's just that some people are willing to tell the truth, and some people want to hide it or be in denial. Denial doesn't fix things, and we've been in denial for generations. And it's cost us dearly. And so what you see as we share information with people, the greatest difficulty you have with people is them coming out of their denial and not admitting that they're in denial. Because it's ugly. Plus, we start recognizing that part of our problem is our own hypocrisy. It's not just that the hybrid European is taking advantage of it, it's also that we're supreme hypocrites and have helped create this farce that we're all suffering from. And then to admit that people around us, friends that we call friends and families, are actually traitors. That's what it is. Get over it and let's start dealing with it. Let's start cleaning up this mess. We're going to have to. It's like this, Dr. Naila, when it gets to the point that the stuff is so dirty and raggedy, it's falling apart. Like somebody who lets their roof leak for years because they don't want to spend the finance, but they buy a new car every year and stuff like that. And they won't spend, a couple thousand to fix their roof, but now the whole house is ruined. And this is basically what's happened to us politically. In a sense, we've neglected the truth of our status and our laws to state. And even 100 some odd years, they didn't really want to listen to Noble Drew Ali, even spent more time trying to discredit him, and everything he said has come true, point for point. And they still don't want to acknowledge that he's the prophet. It's not worshiping him, it's acknowledging his work. And truth don't need an apology. And I'm not apologizing. And this is one of the reasons over the years, Dr. Naila, that I wouldn't take no payoff. I've sacrificed and lived a very simple life and continue to do this work. And they can't buy me.
I don't know that this question has been put in here like several times, and I've ignored it only because you're not talking about this. But someone asked about how information to get their property back. I know that's not something that you can address and what.
This is back to what I've been saying to everyone. Article 3, Section 2 deals with the judicial powers of the people having been granted to the United States in their operations in a consular venue relative to persons and property, etc. That is the venue. However, which we've been telling people for years, Eisenhower closed down and it relinquished jurisdiction from 54 to 56 in that area. And this is why they've been deceiving people about the political jurisdiction of the Kingdom of Morocco, distinguished from the subdivision that it is to the Moroccan Empire that George Washington talked about, etc. And we, the people of the land, the true nationals, have been spending generations marching around trying to be Negro citizens under the civil rights, which is the false venue, the same false venue idea of the Dred Scott issue, trying to be a citizen of the corporation rather than enforcing the treaties. And we have become subjects by rules of naturalization, even though you don't have a naturalization card. You've never been through the process, etc. And you've been assumed, i.e. booty and prize under what is called prize courts.
But is there one place that someone can go and gather the information to reclaim their property?
This is it. Again, what is the status of the being that's making this argument? That's number one.
Right. Are they in their property?
What is the status of the being?
Right.
Has the being come to the proper venue by which to place the argument, which is a consular venue? There you go. Are they arguing a deed, or are they arguing right of estate, reversion of estate, which they have a right to do? The forum is there. Is it to be resolved in another forum? No, it's not the forum. That's the forum. How many people have been openly and indirectly attacking me personally for arguing for years the restoration of the consular venue, Article 3 courts? And yet, that's the law of the land. That's the established law. That is the venue by which the argument should be made. But we keep on organizing, starting all kinds of clubs, all kinds of prayer groups and everything, wishing and hoping in other venues other than the venue that is the established law, not getting results and then getting frustrated.
But does the Article 3 court take place in the de facto jurisdiction?
No, it doesn't.
So if
they don't have it.
So if they went to an Article 3, a consular court, and they deemed, that's your property, you get it back, how do they then?
Hold on. Let's go back. You can't go to a consular court when you're not active in a consular court. You got to be a party to a consular venue. The right already reverted back to the people. Have they claimed it? On the flash drive years ago, and Sister Delilah was very helpful, and we used to hold great seal meetings at her house. And because of these problems that have been going on, I took some questions that I had from my some of my earlier books, and we added to them relative to fundamental jurisconsult principles that have been violated by us by being ignored. and been violated by the hybrid Europeans by them logically ignoring them and suppressing them. And so for our people to become more and more competent in their affairs and restoring the estate. You see, the psychology is, Dr. Naila, the people keep looking for someone else to do what is their responsibility to participate in and reestablish. You need to reactivate. It hasn't been active. It does not mean to be constructed. It needs to be activated by you and people around you. And the orders need to be issued from that venue. The authority is with you. The problem we have is that the people are disengaged from the platform. They keep looking for remedy in the false de facto platforms, which we're stating from the beginning. I would suggest that the divine being that presented that question read Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution for the United States and reformulate that question and request. Read Article 3, read Article 4, Section 4, and read Article 6 in its entirety, put them together, and read them repeatedly, and then reconstruct your question.
So, Titi Asha asked if you could speak on the modern day Boston Tea Party happening right now. Is the V the sweat equity?
The V is what you will call a diversion from the fact that the bond system that we've been telling people, which we refer to as a feedback loop, has collapsed. And it serves multiple purposes: to kill off many of the people who they have obligation to, and to reduce the population for that cause, and to divert them from the fact of that the economic system on the planet, not just here in North America, is in the process of being restructured. Meanwhile, they don't want you coming after their necks. And I'm not talking about next, N-E-X-T. That's what that's about. It's part of the genocide program that has been going on. It's part of them reducing the obligations of the liabilities that exist with their private corporation, i.e. their debts, etc., to the people. And the fact that they've stolen all the retirement funds, the fact that as we've been telling people for the last couple of years, that the last large funding that they had under their control, which is the federal employees unions retirement funds, the politicians have stolen it. So they're trying to eliminate your physical body, because they cannot meet the obligations and liabilities, and they won't meet them. Rather than admit it, they want to kill you.
Here's a question from Adonai Israel Bruins. Please explain the 13th Amendment, Section 12. My students from UCLA are online, Master Teacher.
Let's go to 13th Amendment, Section 12. Here we go. Now, keep in mind, this is another reason why they don't teach of what is called the 1320, because they don't want you to know that, one, you can't forget that they're occupiers, and you can't forget that you are the people of the land, and you can't forget that their operations is slave trade. Their operations is not legitimate government. So let's go to the 1320,
12. 1312.
Excuse me just for a minute, you all. Here's
They said 12, 13, 12.
page 96, and this is below are the original 20 sections of the 13th Amendment from the pages of the congressional records, and that's so that they can't say Taj Tarik made this up, which they have a tendency to do, to try to hide this information, because many of them are guilty for not exposing this information. Section 12. The traffic in slaves with Africa is hereby forever prohibited on pain of death and the forfeiture of all the rights and property of persons engaged therein, and the descendants of Africans shall not be citizens. How straightforward do you need to be? Can you be citizens of that U.S. corporation? Dred Scott? So what's supposed to be enforced is that all their property is supposed to be confiscated. I think isn't that what that executive order that Trump did in 2017? And now their property is being what? Confiscated? Aren't they in violation of the 1320? So nobody likes Trump, do they?
1312.
Trump is assigned, isn't he? See, if you know the history and the law, you'll start looking at things differently, is what I'm trying to present to you all. And you will not be following mainstream media narrative, because you will know they're actually deceiving you. It's not defending Trump, it's putting things in proper perspective. It's also by which you can vet him and others. This is old work. I've been telling people this stuff for years. Thought I was out to lunch. Now it's hitting them in their pockets, their homes, and their lives, and now in their arms. It's not good. Not good at all. But you can't make people do their own research and look at stuff. They keep on trying to believe things or not believe things rather than take responsibility and start cross-references, because they would see that much of this stuff that you've been told for years is absolutely true, but you believe Rome instead of your own blood. You accepted a stranger before your own blood. Now we're all paying dear prices about it and for it. But we're still breathing. Better late than never, that's how I say it.
I know they have a lot more questions for you. We hit 1,000 on Friday. But I want to say, I want to add before I forget, that if you all are really can't get enough, and I know you can't get enough of Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey, he is going to be doing an interview tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the Revision Radio Network on YouTube. So I'll put that in the comments in the chat, or maybe I'll just have to make a little post. Tomorrow at 7 p.m., Grand Sheik is going to be on Revision Radio Network on YouTube, and I'm not sure if they'll be able to ask more questions like some of the ones they might have tonight that we may not get to. But I wanted to make sure that you know that you'll have another opportunity tomorrow evening to hear from Grand Sheik. And we have got to get your books reprinted, because everybody want to know where they get the treaty book, when they get the Warship, the speller books, and all these books.
And again, and you already know how busy I am.
Right.
Even the bill. This is the issue. It's not so much of a problem, because as we reissue the books, I don't want to issue the modified versions that the people have been getting for years.
That's why I haven't said anything about them going other places.
Yes, they've been modified during the time of their original print for cost purposes, and because we were desktop printing, due to the fact that I would not take a payoff for a major printer to print them, which they tried to get me to remove certain information. And so in concept, a lot of the information that was highly redacted just for the purposes of concept printing. And so what is known as the Adeptus or the original manuscripts, and much of the stuff was cut out, and I want to put that back in when we republish. And of course, because I've had people around me who I already knew were actually, you might say, infiltrators who were offering to help, I limited my operations with them. And even though some of this stuff was to be published actually last year or year before, because I know certain things that I've never spoken of certain people around me, I did not go forward because I already knew certain things that I haven't been talking about. However, I have not ever hesitated speaking to you bluntly about some of the things that are of the original manuscript that have not been in these books, much of which I've been reading from you very often when we make comments from the House of Reawakening Minds. It's not that anything has been held back. It is just that in the print, some of the stuff had been edited out. And when I have these redone, I'm going to put all of the original manuscripts in. That's all. But the concepts are all there in all of them, basically.
You need to combine a couple of them. Anyway, let's go back up and see.
And it's sort of like, and it's not that I'm holding back. You know, like it's Dr. Naila, you know how from my view, to me, it's old hat stuff. If you kind of comprehend where I'm coming from. And it's not that I don't appreciate the people's concern, but it's like this stuff I've been teaching for so many years is like, print this up. It's already out there. And then plus, many people actually been making a living off of stealing a lot of the literature. And so it's out there in one way, form, or another anyway. However, for the sake of history, whatever, I'm going to, systematically see that Sister Cynthia, get some of the original manuscripts and get this stuff out to the people. With all due respect. And it's sort of like, you know how like it is, Dr. Naila, when from my point of view, and I'm not defending anything or making excuses, by me living the experience of seeing a lot of things that we talked about before already manifesting, it's almost like, oh, that's done. This is already in works. And so, not that, it's sort of like, do I need to repeat this?
Some people are just hearing about it.
This is already taking place. It's already manifesting. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I don't have that mental enthusiasm that some of the people would relative to it. I apologize for that, but it's like, it's old hat to me, not disrespecting the principles. It's just like, I've been doing this for so many years. It's like, and then seeing these things take place, I'm trying to really advance the people the best that I can to my limitations rather than bog them down with stuff that I've taught 25 years ago. That I'm assuming that most of the people who are somewhat conscious are already on top of that and we're moving forward type thing.
Absolutely. I know, but there's always new people that are just discovering.
Which is, again, this redundancy, right. With all due respect. And because that you see so many people becoming awake and they need that foundation, yes. Foundation information, I comprehend that.
Right.
Yes.
Question was, could you give a good book to obtain on trust law? Weiss is already.
Just, as we're starting to teach the people.
Have something on the flash drive though too.
Yeah,
we do have something on the USB drive. Yeah,
we have something on the flash drive, and because and this is what I've recognized over the years, as we've been teaching the people, the printers and the operators of the mainstream news or press have actually jacked the prices up of these books extremely high to kind of lock the people out. Let me give you an example. As a matter of just a few years ago, just a couple of years ago. Remember, even over the House of Reawakening Mind, Dr. Naila, when we would have ancient and modern jurisprudence books, and we'd have Nabi and Anissa, and then bring, and what the books were, 55 notes, 50 notes, 55 notes. Now the same books, they're charging people 800, 450, like that, and when, it's sort of like, as we try to wake the people up and encourage them to stop vesting their finance in sneaks and to start rebuilding their libraries for their children, the people sometimes seem to drag their feet, to get around to it. And then when they do, and the hybrid European catches on that we're teaching the people, they hack the prices up of these books that the people can't afford them.
I know.
And again, why we do flash drives to try to help the people the best we can, but we need you to help us help you. We can't make you stop procrastinating. What can you say? Except that the people are going to have to start taking responsibility. And I comprehend, with people doubting, because you should examine everything. But we try our best here at the House of Reawakening Minds to tell you things that we know that other people hold as controversial and won't go there. And so we stick our necks out and tell you things that other people get mad at us about. But the deal is, we're trying to save you a lot of pain, a lot of misery, a lot of loss. But you have to examine, cross-examine, and listen, and activate. The old saying, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. And we're not trying to make the horse drink. There's so much work to do. This is everybody's business. However, they keep looking at a handful of men and women to do the work. This is not the age of sacrificial Jesuses. That age is done. It is all of us together, coming together and using the energy of divine mind, divine feminine, and divine masculine in harmony to help uplift all humanity for real, and stop fronting. It's not an age of followership anymore. That age is dead. It's the age of partnership and harmony. And logically, the dark priesthood and their minions don't want harmony. So that's why you see them taking their mask off and getting hostile.
It sounds like I'm on a career.
But it's what it is. The deal of it is, how strong are you in the battle? Recognize that you're in a battle against principalities and powers. And those are represented in the physical bodies of people who are in the business of enslaving you and extorting you. And also dragging you back into the mud.
Someone asked, do they contact Brother Lamont L for consular assistance?
Well, you already know the House of Reawakening Minds. You'll see them come on every once in a while. And, they've explained and shared their information with many of you. Go back on some of the videos from the House of Reawakening Minds and, start activating your connections.
We have 6 minutes left. Do you want to talk about last Saturday?
Oh, wasn't that beautiful?
Event?
Yes. I also want to thank all the family, brothers and sisters and kin that came from all around the country. You came to share last week with us. Oh, and the food was great, wasn't it, Dr. Naila?
Food, yes. Natural nature. Oh, natural nature herbs.
Oh, yeah. That was serious. Anyway.
It was a very good event.
Yes. And so many credits that we could give, but there's so many people that, it's impossible. So we want to say to all of you, thank you for sharing the time with us. Thank you for your participation in helping in the great missionary work of helping to uplift all humanity. And I give much respect for those of you who respect the foundation work done by our illustrious Prophet Noble Drawley and the good works that he has done in helping to redeem our people and to help redeem our nation. And truth needs no apology.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so your continued support of the House of Reawakening Minds is greatly appreciated, and you can volunteer to assist us with your technical skills and abilities by calling Dr. G during normal business hours at 302-345-0500. That is 302-345-0500. And you can also support via cash.me $/ reawakening or paypal.me Naila Gilliam, written as one word. Thank you for sharing with us. And or you can send money orders payable to the House of Reawakening Minds and sent to 602 Vandever Avenue, Wilmington, Delaware Republic, zip exempt 19802. Thank you for sharing this evening with us. Hope we've done some good. And many of you, this is redundant for some of you, but for many of you who are less aware of the real politics, please take some of this information, do some research, and you'll see it involves all the political, economic, and social activity that's taking place mostly against you right now. And as things are being uncovered, much of this information you will find very useful to yourselves, and you're being more capable of taking responsibility for your affairs and for your family. And keep in mind, as these people start suffering more and more, their ears will become more and more open, and they'll be more and more willing to listen to the truth and start taking responsibility and helping in this great missionary work of helping to uplift fallen humanity.
I also want to add, and there's not a whole lot I can say about this, but I think I'm going live tomorrow during the day, and I want to talk about a couple things. But in light of what I shared with you yesterday about the brother, I think there's so many more people that need to know about that. So
yes.
The AO scan,
yes,
and what it does, because if you all are interested, you see me putting up a link about AO scan. A lot of you don't know what it's about, an energy scanner, but it's more than what you think, and
much more
than what you think. It's just that we're not given the freedom to be very open about what exactly it does. But if you are interested in knowing more about the AO scan, which I believe everyone should have in their home, it's not something.
But you know what, Dr. Naila?
What's that?
That shows you. And remember, you already know their stages too.
Right.
Layers.
Right.
That shows you the ancient technology that was always known.
Well, when we first learned about it last year, one of the aspects of the scan, we were told that was Moorish technology, which was the inner voice technology that can pick up with the voice and everything. But we were told that it was Moorish technology. That was like, oh, okay, that was deep. But it's deeper. It even goes deeper than that. And to have the brother call me from the hospital with his situation, and to be able to pick up from distance what was actually going on with him, and then to send him something.
You know what that is also proof of when you think about it, and you really don't have to think about it. It's proof, absolute proof of electronic, mathematical, spiritual world.
Yeah. And the only reason I'm saying something is because so many of us are going through a lot of things physical, and folk are scared about, they don't want to get that, but I feel every sniffle, every this or whatever, they think that they've got something. And so they need to know that there's something that you can do about it. So thank you so much. You leaving before we even shut off? He's leaving, y'all, and I'm on the other side of the camera. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Grand Sheik is going to be on I call him Brother Pharaoh 19. is going to be interviewing him tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. Revision Network on YouTube. Right now, go over. I don't know, he may not even have it set up yet, but just set your clock. 7 p.m. Eastern or thereabouts. He is going to interview Grand Sheik. It's going to be at least probably a couple hours of the interview, and you maybe able to ask more questions then. Again, I want to thank you all. Again, I want to echo what Grand Sheik said about all of you who came out on last Saturday. My sister Mad Love, who acted as our official greeter. Thank you so much, my sister. You had the right spirit, and everything was beautiful. Thank you for everything that you did, and thank you for all the presenters, Grand Sheik, Father Hannibal, Dr. Botanica, Brother Dave, Mother Kai, Sister Yasharin, aka Sharon Tracy Gale Bay, Brother Seton Ra Bay, and yours truly. We appreciate it. We'll be doing it again next year. Thank you so much. We absolutely love and appreciate you, and we are going to check out right now because it's getting late, and you'll be able to see him tomorrow. Again, thank you, one and all.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds.